baby boomers.
I used to be with it.
Millennials.
Okay, boomer.
Generation X.
What's going on?
And Gen Z. What do they have in common? Not a lot, it turns out. But one thing they can agree on is that this is the political podcast they want to listen to. Welcome to Not My Generation, the political podcast that looks at political events, news, and happenings across the world and at home through a generational lens. Your hosts are Dr. Emily Stacy and Professor James Davenport, two political scientists from Rose State College. But the views expressed on this program are solely the views of the host and their guests and do not reflect the views of Rose State College, its administration, faculty, or students. Coming up on today's program.
If we can pay $1 billion to a company to relocate here, Texas can pay $2 billion.
That's right.
Well, we are in times of transition.
Now I'm disheveled and gray, and
You're looking a little Obama after 6 years. The FDA is like my trigger. I don't know why. Well, because it's useless.
this is kind of my first insight being exposed to this like seedy underbelly of kids' sports, and I don't like it.
And now, here are James and Emily. Hello, Emily. How are you?
Fantastic, James. How are you?
I am doing pretty well.
Excellent.
It's a medium kind of day, a little cloudy. I don't know if we're going to get rain or not. If we don't get rain, I hope the clouds go away.
No.
You like the clouds?
Yes.
I don't like clouds unless there's rain associated with it.
Yeah, I know. That's part of your like libertarian optimism or something.
Probably is something akin to that.
No, clouds are wonderful. I'm not ready for it to be 110 degrees, so I'm going to just enjoy this 68, like cloudy. It's gorgeous outside. You be quiet.
All right.
And knock on some wood.
I won't say anything. I'm just, we have with us today.
Our favorite Republican, my favorite, my favorite Republican. I should not speak for James Davenport, Lord knows.
How about if we say
my favorite Republican
one
senator.
of our favorite guests.
Okay, fine.
Senator Adam Pugh from the Oklahoma State Senate.
We love him.
And we're going to be talking about budget and transparency and whatever else we can.
What the hell happened, man?
Yeah, what's going on there?
The last time we saw you, everything was hunky-dory in the budget process. We were on track to be done by mid-May, and
now I'm disheveled and gray, and
you're looking a little Obama after 6 years, sir. I think you did grow a little patch of gray on your sideburn.
Yeah.
Well, before we get to all of that,
yes, oh Lord,
I've got a little rant.
I didn't let him get on his
today.
soapbox.
I don't know, Emily, if you have noticed, I'm a little fair-skinned, a little fair-complected. I don't know if you picked up on that.
No, not at all.
I do not spend a lot of time in the sun. And when I do, I'm usually either covered up with clothes or with sunscreen. And that's where we're going to go today.
I wasn't expecting this twist. But
yes, sunscreen. I know you're like,
I'm here for
what
it.
the heck does that have to do with anything?
The context clues when you came in should have picked, right? There were context clues, sir.
So I was reading an article written by Peter Boettke. He's an economist out of George Mason University. And he was talking about the regulatory process for approving sunscreens in the United States. This is the tie-in, right? You were wondering how I was going to get government into this, right? So
don't doubt us, Senator Pugh.
Here is the relevant portion of what I was talking about is, it says, in the European Union, sunscreens are regulated as cosmetics, which means they have greater flexibility in approving active ingredients, right? However, in the U.S., they're regulated as drugs, which means they have a much more expensive and time-consuming process to get their active ingredients done. What does this mean? In the short, it means that a lot of the sunscreens we have available to us in the U.S. are actually less safe than what you could get in the European Union. So the next time I'm going to the European Union, I'm stocking up on sunscreen.
Is that what we're doing?
Because, and we have known for a long time, the FDA is one of the most bureaucratic, time-consuming, expensive regulatory agencies that we have.
And useless.
And the ability of it to ensure safety is continuously called into question.
Listeria in your chocolate chip cookie dough.
And so I'm not going to go full bore libertarian and say, get rid of it.
I am.
But I'm certainly going to be saying it needs some real examination of its processes, right? And it's not really just this. I was thinking back to, and he actually mentions this in the article he writes, the CDC, when early COVID came out and you had private companies who were developing very effective COVID tests, and the CDC wouldn't let them administer them, right? Wouldn't let them distribute them. And we need to come back to a little bit of reality here and say, and meanwhile, in Germany and some other, again, European countries, that's what was going on, right? And so not only do you have the pandemic going on, but the ability to identify who has it is greatly reduced in the U.S. because the federal government got in the way, and now they're getting in the way, and they're going to get me more sunburns than I want. And expose me to more skin cancer, which I don't need.
So I love this. Number one, this is the one topic that you and I will equally match each other in the ranting. The FDA is like my trigger. I don't know why. Well, because it's useless. Anyway, so specifically, this is a 1938 law that they are being hamstrung by. So this is way back, generations ago, century ago. So again, this is a 1938 U.S. law requiring sunscreens be tested on animals and classified as drugs rather than cosmetics, as in much of the rest of the world. And so this is why. I can't imagine why we think, or why so antiquated 1938.
Can we blame this on boomers? I don't think so. That's even before them, right? So this is,
So I don't know.
So there's my rant for the day. I want better sunscreens, and I want the FDA to get out of the way.
This is perfect. So I pulled up an article really quick, NPR, on this topic because you're right. So in a rare example of bipartisanship last summer, it says Senator Mike Lee from Utah, Republican, thanked Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, for urging the FDA to speed up approvals of new, more effective sunscreens. So you have just sided with AOC.
At that. Oh my gosh, now I'm going to be in trouble, right? All of my conservative folks are going to just say, we knew you were a liberal.
So there's a bipartisan bill in the House, pending in the House that would require the FDA to allow non-animal testing. And so that's where all of this is.
About that. Right? Yeah, right. So maybe we'll get some action in a year or two.
Maybe because you fair-skinned people are now upset. You've been alerted to the problem.
We figured out what's going on.
Maybe some things will happen. You guys are consumers, obviously, and we would think that people are trying to get your money.
You would think, right? Yeah.
Are you or your organization looking for unvarnished, unbiased scholarly political analysis for your op-eds, candidates debates, or interviews regarding all things political?
Well, look no further. We are the Democracy Slingers. We're here to host, comment, educate, or just preach the good word of American politics to your school, club, company, or organization. Get in touch with us at democracyslingers@gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, we don't obviously need to do the icebreakers with Senator Pugh.
We've done that before.
We know how awesome he is.
Well, I tell you what, is there anything new since you've been visited with us that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Geez, you're asking me a tough question there. I'll tell you what, I am entering the world. So, I've got little kids, right? And, I grew up in a small town. Edmond's not a small town. The Edmond School District is not a small school district. I'm entering the world of competitive youth sports. And this is wild for me because I'm thinking now about like my 9-year-old daughter who's very good at soccer. But now I'm thinking when she's in high school, is she even going to make the team? Mm-hmm. And I just read an article last week and it was titled Why Travel Sports is Killing the American Family.
Travel sports. So
travel
going
sports,
to
like when you're on like these competitive travel teams, and I know families that are spending like upwards of tens of thousands of dollars to buy uniforms and pay for individual coaches, and they're going to Little Rock for a tournament, and they're going to Dallas for a baseball tournament, and you're not eating dinner right? You're not eating dinner as a family. Some people are mortgaging financial security to, and I think the number is 0.93% of all athletes will ever play professionally.
Right.
in anything,
It's a
right.
tiny fraction.
That is a very competitive world. And so I'm already starting to think like, man, can my kids at least make the team in high school? Because, you want your kids to be involved in extracurricular activities. And so I've already seen like the interesting dynamics of, kind of I think in our generation, I'm Gen X, we talked about it last time, everything was played through the school, right? Like you played on the high school basketball team, and now there's all these like rec teams and AAU and all these outside the school leagues. And so you have, like I played baseball at a relatively high level, and I played maybe 20 games a year as a kid. And now you have families, 12-year-olds playing 100 games a year.
That's
on
insane.
multiple
I'm
travel
sorry. That's just
teams. And
insane.
it's crazy. And this is kind of my first insight being exposed to this like seedy underbelly of kids sports. And I don't like it. And I love sports and I don't like it.
When my kids,
so that's new.
Yeah. When my kids were younger, they were all in Taekwondo. Yep. And we did some traveling tournaments and stuff, in Texas and whatnot, and went to the AAU nationals a couple of years. And yeah, there was some expense associated with that. Then one of my kids kind of got a little bit interested in gymnastics. Yep. You want to talk about expensive. That sport is super expensive.
I believe it.
And we were like, you're not going to be that good, son. Just don't worry about it, And I don't mean to crash someone's dreams, but I mean, at some point you do have to be realistic about it.
And it's sad because, I think sports can teach you so much, right? About teamwork, how to win and lose with grace and dignity, right? How to be a great teammate, how to dedicate yourself to something and like improve. And so the dedication and perseverance and all those things. I worry that we're gonna price people out of just what is a great adolescent experience, right? And all the wonderful things that I learned about playing youth sports is going to become unattainable for a lot of kids. And I think what you're going to see is a lot of kids burn out. Yeah. Right. There was a very famous high draft pick who played quarterback at USC. His name was Todd Marinovich. And his dad had been a kind of like a quarterback guru and had started grooming him when he was like 5 or 6 years old to become this professional quarterback. I think he's dead because I think he like was so burnt out and felt the pressure from his dad. They had a very strained relationship. I think he got into like drug use and abusive relationships, and it all is traced back to like, I'm going to take this 5-year-old kid and make him an NFL quarterback. And I think he even wrote quite a bit about it, about like how it ruined his relationship with his dad, and he hated football, right? Even though like he was obviously born with a natural talent to throw a football, and I don't want that for kids. Right, I hate that.
Well, at the end of the day, sports should be fun.
Yes,
they shouldn't be work in that kind of sense, right? Yes. I mean, we both played high school sports. You have to work to be good and that kind of thing, but it should be fun, right? Yes. And I fear that you're exactly right. We're taking the fun out of this, and people are a little unrealistic about the opportunities that are available to young people via sports. Right?
Yep.
Of course, now that the NCAA is going to be paying or
that's
allowing
an interesting
schools
topic
to be
in and of
paying,
itself.
their athletes, and I don't really have a problem with that. They're making billions of dollars off these athletes, right? Many of these athletes who come from very poor circumstances to be there, I have no problem with that. But I'm wondering how that's going to impact people thinking about this, right? Am I going to be more inclined because now my kid can make $1 million while they're in college, right?
Amateurism's dead, right? We could say that for sure, right? The kind of the sanctity of college sports is dead, right? The geographic rivalries, I hate this school, I hate this school, that's dead, right? And the next issue will not be college sports. We'll be talking, and I think it's already happening. Can a high school kid? What's to stop the best 9th grader in high school basketball from signing an NIL? Right. And who regulates that? The state, right? Like in Oklahoma, it'd be the Oklahoma Secondary School Sports Athletic Association. And so that that'll be, and that's, for me and the chair of education, it actually has already popped up. And we've already had to deal with some NIL pieces of legislation and the whole idea of should a student athlete become just an employee of the university? And at that point, it becomes, do they even have to go to school anymore?
Right.
If you can just hire a guy like you can a faculty.
I'm not necessarily opposed to that, by the way.
I actually think that's where I'm going.
Is that what you're going to
I really do. Okay. I think I'm leaning that way.
Here's my thinking is the more we can separate these big time athletic things, which are really simply minor league sports in a different format from the educational process, the more we will improve the educational process.
And that's to a kid who's getting paid to play at a particular university, why should we also then go make them take a class they don't want to take, right? Because I think to some degree, and this has always been my frustration, is you are devaluing the educational experience. Right. And that's, and again, I know that's there's a lot of, it is, and there's a lot of strong feelings about this, but I feel that's where we're going. And frankly, I'll be controversial. It's greedy college presidents, in my opinion. Greedy college presidents who abdicated their responsibility to the NCAA. They chased a buck because it was, CBS will pay us $50 million a year if we go to the SEC. Or if we leave, our historical conference and we go, so now you're going to have a Saturday afternoon. USC is playing Rutgers in Piscataway, New Jersey. No one cares at all, right? And who loses? The athlete loses because you're going to travel cross country, right, for a 3-hour game and travel back, and then they're going to say, "Hey, you're going to be in class on Monday." No, you're not.
And you've got a test. You got an algebra test.
So I just, I'm frustrated because I love sports and I'm frustrated.
Well, we are in times of transition all over the place. And I think that's one more evidence of that, how we perceive college athletics, what its role is, what the justness is of forcing young men and women to play a sport and say, but you're going to have to starve to do it. I think all of that should be on the table and discussed. But I think you're right. I don't know that there's a way to change that without dramatically changing the system itself. And so it's going to be interesting times. Yeah. Speaking of interesting.
Yes.
Like that segue, right? We had an interesting event yesterday.
We had a few
in New York
events yesterday. Yes.
All right.
I mean, for Senator Pugh, the interesting event was he got let off of
yesterday was Sine Die. I thought that's where you were going. That was very interesting in my world.
Yes.
No.
We'll get there.
We will get to that in a minute, but we got to pick your brain on the convictions that came back on Trump. Both of Emily and I had been discussing earlier our surprise at that he was convicted on every single charge. And that those came back relatively quickly. And so my question is it going to matter in regards to his nomination by the Republican Party? And so I'm throwing that over to you.
Yeah. Well, as I said, and I mean this, and this is not pure deflection, though I know it's going to sound that way, frankly, I really have not been tracking the case and mostly because I feel like I'm living in my own political reality at the Capitol, right? But
you've been a little busy.
Yeah, right. But I think I was equally surprised at the speed and the fact that the verdict, I guess I just never imagined that this is where we would be and really hoped we wouldn't, right? And I know there's strong feelings on both sides of kind of the verdict, right? I think in the end, what you'll see is the people who are inclined to support him will be more fervently supporting, and the people who are inclined to not will now feel justified that they shouldn't be. And I think, sadly, in my opinion, what's going to happen is it's just going to push people further to their corners. And what it does in the end is I think it fuels what seems to be just a growing mistrust or distrust of the system and the people in the system. And that's what really, in the end, makes me sad, irrespective of the merits of the case or the lack of merits, right? Again, regardless of your perspective, it's pushing people further to their corners and pushing further distrust. And And, you know, as someone who's kind of living on a lower tier of all of that, right? And I always say we're downstream of culture. Washington, D.C. is downstream of culture. We're downstream of the Washington, D.C. issues. And this is certainly, though it was inside of a New York City courtroom, this is really a Washington, D.C. thing, right? And that I worry that it's just going to further polarize people.
I think that's probably pretty accurate. I don't see the fervent Trump supporter. I don't see this peeling them away.
No.
Those who are fervent Trump haters, this is just going to lock them in more. See, we told you. And the little sliver of folks who are not in either of those camps, I don't know where they play out, right? I don't know if this. Now, we have seen some polling in the past that said people had said in surveys, if Trump was convicted, they would rethink their support of him, right? And that was across the board of independents and Republicans. It'll be interesting to see if this particular trial is the one that will have that kind of impact, or if and we've got a long summer to go before we even get into reigns. It's going to be interesting. There was some talk about debates, and I think there was an agreement in principle, at least, to maybe one debate in June
27th.
And so I am sure that conviction will come up in that debate.
If it happens.
Yes, if it happens, and we will see. But it just seems to me that you're right. At the end of the day, this is not going to be the thing that brings us together in any way, shape, or form. And that's unfortunate because we already have too many things pulling us apart.
And as I'll take off my own partisan hat, right? Because won't hide, I'm a Republican senator, right?
I've heard that rumor.
But sure, other rumors too, probably. But if I'm a Democrat, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, did we just cost ourselves? I mean, to some degree, I'm like, did I just further galvanize, people in the other direction, right? Sure. If I'm a Republican, I would be thinking, well, geez, my biases are confirmed that the justice system is out to be weaponized for political purposes. In the end, I look at this from a purely political science perspective. In November, it's still going to come down to Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona. I mean, and so really, if you're studying this kind of comprehensively, what did it do to those swing voters who are undecided in those very few key states that are going to decide this? And that I haven't seen any data or polling data, and it'll take a little while. But that will be interesting to see from a week ago, a month ago, where did those voters who are going to decide in those states, and that those states are going to some degree decide the election, where did those swing voters or undecideds go?
We love communication that goes both ways, not just you listening to us pontificate. We would love to hear from our audience. If you have comments, suggestions, or would like to contact us about possibly being a guest on the show, please email notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu.
Well, let's get back to something that you were more steeply enmeshed in over the last month or so, right? We have a state budget. It's a little bit smaller than last year's budget. Is my understanding about 5%,
5.37,
something like that.
Yeah.
I want to get your take first on the transparency initiative. When we had you on before, there were kind of some high hopes that this thing would play out well. I think the general perception is, for the most part, it did. Although I have some reservations a little bit about some of it, but. For the most part, we did get to a budget. And tell us your take about how did that transparency initiative all play out, and your thoughts about that.
And who were the winners and losers in the process?
Yeah, geez. So I think it was Scott Carter with the Oklahoman asked me as I was walking off the floor yesterday. Everything's still pretty raw. Like we had just signed, he died, and the gavel had just struck. And he said, what do you think? And I likened it to an airplane because we just use that analogy a lot. We landed the plane. And I said, we landed the plane. It was a little bumpy. The passengers got jostled around a little bit during the turbulence, but we landed the plane and we made it to our destination, right? And so I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned that maybe we didn't even think about when we went into session and we were going to push this transparency initiative. And so I've been actually keeping notes of things that I've learned during the process of things I'd like to change next year. And the number one thing is we should go to our house. The House and the Senate are both undergoing new leadership. Yes. I believe we should take some time with the key leaders in the Senate and the House over the interim after everyone's been with their families and things have tempered down a little bit, and say, okay, we got there and it wasn't beautiful. How do we make this better? Respecting that the House is going to have a different process and the Senate's going to have a different process, but we have to do this better next year, not as combative, and still allow for the individual chambers to do this their own way, but not just make it where I'm going to bulldoze my way through or you're going to bulldoze your way through and we'll just get there and, consequences be damned. We landed the airplane. And so I think that we'll have some time to do that. And especially, again, as the leadership change happens in both chambers, there'll be some time to build new relationships and mend fences with some old ones and have a chance to do this better. And that's what I always say. Every year we should try to be better than we were the year before and applying lessons learned. And to some degree, the way I did it in the military, when I flew a mission, we debriefed, what went right and how could the things that went wrong or, we maybe didn't do as smoothly as we wanted to, how do we do that better the next flight? And so it's kind of the same concept. And so, on the budget side, the actual dollars and cents, though the recurring revenue went down, the total appropriations went up and that was intentional. So I think if you're just reading that, you think, oh my goodness, they cut the budget. What we did is we had a lot of cash we wanted to kind of spend and make one-time kind of infusions, if you will, or capital investments into deferred maintenance for higher ed was a huge winner. A huge winner for you all, because I've heard from institutions across the state that, hey, I've got a STEM lab from the 60s that I don't even have a working HVAC system. Right. And so that was a huge push for us to make some capital investments there. And we did that. So that was a big winner. I didn't get everything I wanted in education policy or the budget, but we made another investment into the K through 12 funding formula. Okay. So I think that's important for us to do year over year as the budget allows. We had two huge wins in education policy: graduation pathways, which we had not modernized in decades. So we changed graduation pathways to allow a lot of flexibility for school districts. So now, as an example, in Oklahoma City Public Schools, which I had worked with quite closely, a child now can walk across the stage getting their high school diploma and a certificate in HVAC or plumbing or because of the pathways and the flexibility we've given the schools to do that. And then on the very last day, of course, we waited till the end. We passed the most comprehensive reading and literacy program in the country. Okay. And we learned with Mississippi, who's kind of been known as the great turnaround in literacy because their scores after they did some very big literacy initiatives. So we took some of the things they were doing. Tennessee was another place. Florida was one. And we launched a really robust, what's called now the Strong Readers Act, to do early childhood intervention and identify and then help children with additional resources get on level for reading, which we know will, facilitate a lifetime of learning once they gain that very foundational skill set. And then the transparency, I think it's interesting because there's a lot of feelings on was it good or was it bad to see it up close. Right. So as far as a win, Oklahomans saw the messy side of how we make the budget. Yeah. They did. So if you're pro-transparency, you saw it. Mm-hmm. Now, the downside, what I heard from a lot of people is, well, it gave an opportunity for a lot of grandstanding because you knew the cameras were rolling. Yes. You knew that this was going to be picked up on a microphone. So I'm going to just say something that'll make for a good headline or be a good quote. And it's not even really something I want in the budget, but look at me, I'm fighting for whatever issue du jour I want to make a point on. And so I don't know. I think we provided sunshine to a lot of things that were my frustrations and kind of behind the scenes deals that I wasn't real keen on. It didn't mean we eliminated all of that, because it's still a negotiation.
Right.
Whether you're doing it in public or in private, there's a little bit of I'll trade you this for that, and that can make people uncomfortable. That I have to compromise something I wanted because I have to give James or Emily something they wanted in the budget. But that's the process.
That's
yeah.
politics.
So
we are hopeful then
yes.
that the process is going to continue after new leadership is in place.
Yes.
Okay.
I am hopeful. Now it will look different and continue to be tweaked to some degree, but I hope now it maybe doesn't have to be as contentious. There will always be issues of contention. The chambers are different on purpose, right? But I think that there's time for us to reflect a little bit on taking personalities out of it. You know, where can we make this process better, and how can we still be respectful of each other's individual caucuses and chambers? Mm-hmm. On the Senate side, and I was involved in the House side, and I think though Kay Floyd would admit, she didn't get the budget she wanted, she has been, I think, very complimentary of that we did it in public. And I know, like, on our subcommittees, because it's, your subcommittees are made up of Democrats and Republicans. I know on my subcommittee and my colleagues as well, our Democrats were very involved in that process, right? They're not chairing the committee, and they wouldn't necessarily, they're one vote of maybe, 4 or 5 on the committee, but I know they were involved, and I handed over, hey, go meet with this agency. You become the expert. I mean, so to some degree, even though there's politics there, it was bipartisan, right? Now, in the end, did they get exactly what they wanted, or that's just the nature of the way our partisan split is and makeup in the Senate. But I think Kay certainly, I think, was at least appreciative that we took a pretty significant step forward in involving everybody who was willing to put the work in the state Senate.
I'm glad you brought Senator Floyd up. We just kind of wrapped another conversation regarding the budget process, and it was noted that in the governor's historic unprecedented summits, that there was not a lot of minority representation in terms of Democrats, but also in terms of inclusivity, not very many women, if any at all, at the table. And so, number one, do you think that in future budget processes that there will be governor summits that will be necessary, number one? And then secondarily, if so, will they be more inclusive based on the kind of backlash that we've seen from this process?
I don't know if the governor will continue to do these summits. Some of that
was very curious.
Some of that was a little bit of the gamesmanship, if you will, between really the 3 key principles there: the speaker, the pro tem of the Senate, and the governor. And if, it was kind of kicked off from an email from the governor to pro tem Treat and Speaker McCall, and then pro tem Treat responded all. And so he actually pushed to have every senator there, and we wanted to host it in room 535 of the Senate.
Okay.
So,
wow.
In terms of, I wasn't involved in why wasn't, Kay Floyd sitting at the table or not? Right. I mean, I think, yes, it's always good for us to be reflective of our districts and the state as a whole. I think if I was in the minority party, you better believe I'd be fighting to be at the table, but that isn't the way it works. And if I've always said, for all of our issues, we say the partisan issues, if you in Oklahoma, if you were in California where it's very heavily, blue, it'd be the Democrats fighting with each other between the governor and the speaker and the pro tem of the Senate. And so that's going to be just state dependent, but we certainly want to, and we try. I mean, we try to make sure that we're being reflective of our communities. And sometimes that means, you're voting against your party, or you're voting against, leadership, if you go down that building, you cannot be afraid to do what you think is the right thing.
That's right.
And that should be irrespective of political party or, who helped you get there. You need to go down there. I mean, I look at it this way. I have 12 years to be in that building. I want to make a difference, right? I'm not there to just show up and collect the paycheck and sit in the back of the chamber and not get stuff done. And a lot of times, frankly, you swing for the fences and you miss. You swing and miss, and that's a frustrating endeavor.
The biggest criticism I have is what you have kind of outlined already, which is that early on in these summits, I didn't get the sense there was a lot of negotiation going on. There was a lot of position taking, a lot of, like you said, gamesmanship. Are you going to give us tax cuts or this kind of, that kind of thing? And it seemed that being in front of the cameras actually slowed the negotiation process down from what it could have been. Now, I get that a lot of people are like, yes, but at least we got to see that. Maybe next time, just don't put them in a room and don't tell them there's cameras in there, and then maybe they'll act like there aren't, and we'll get to see more of the reality then, and less of that kind of showmanship.
What's funny is there's three of us sitting here talking about this, and I wonder how many more of us there are. I don't think it's many, and I think that's part of the issue, right? Is we had public meetings starting in November, and I don't know how many were tuning in, but it was a dozen maybe watching us online. And so sometimes you're in that building and you do get sucked into the bubble where you think this is all everyone's talking about. This is what everyone's paying attention to. And it may be 200 people across the state that are actually watching a committee meeting or
so you can even, I'm throwing out suggestions here, right? Because I loved the portal, the House portal. I love the fact that you guys put up your spreadsheets. All of that was wonderful. I mean, that alone is a better start than what we've had in the past. But you could even in these negotiations, just make them take a transcript and provide that transcript after the fact and it just seemed to me that the cameras and the reporters there gave an incentive to do something other than true negotiation. And that wasn't the most productive part of this process.
I agree with that. I mean, for me, what I took away from this is I could go back to my district in Edmond, and if everybody wanted to know, again, I think it's a very small percent, but if somebody wanted to know at the start of session or even midway through session, what was Adam Pugh as the chair of education? What were his priorities? It didn't have to be what I said into a microphone or was on a camera. You saw it, right? We took votes on it early, which normally doesn't happen until the end, right? And you could see, here are Adam Pugh's priorities. He wants to invest in workforce. I wanted a support staff stipend. I wanted to put additional money into literacy. That was a big deal for me. So I think that was a win for us as the Senate. It wasn't so much what happened in front of the camera, but it was that from October 1st, which is the constitutional requirement for the agency to submit their budget requests to us as a legislature. From that day forward, everything was public. And so it wasn't so much for me the performative as it was the substantive, which was my committee was publicly having those conversations and publicly taking votes very early to show the state where we stood. And that, I think, in and of itself, at least, is a good starting point for us in future years. How we then reconcile those two things at the end of session, the House's position, the Senate's position, will honestly probably continue to be quite a bloody battle for a long time.
I mean, that's the legislative process, right? There's no getting around that. Okay, so what didn't happen that you wish would have happened this session? What are some things that you feel like didn't get accomplished?
For me, the workforce, that's been a focus for several years. I think it was already trending that direction pre-COVID. But, after coming out of COVID, every business that I've spoken to has said, where are the people? some of it is a paradigm shift of, workers that now like to work remote, want to be virtual. They want to be based in Boston, but live in Edmond, right? That's a big shift, I think. And so I think businesses are still adjusting to that. Part of it is millennials and Gen Zs who want something very different out of their professional experience and kind of their work life and the balance they want, the meaning and all of that stuff. But a part of it is we allowed skill sets to lapse as we moved out of kind of a post-World War II economy into a digital age, technology-driven economy. And so reskilling people and changing our educational systems to be more very specific about, if you want to be a cybersecurity expert, do you really need a 4-year degree, or is it a 1-year credential that gets you into the workforce and kind of learning? And so I don't think we've really aligned our educational systems and figured out exactly what our economy needs and how do you do it at the best value and ROI to the taxpayer, to the student, et cetera. And that was something I've focused on for a few years. And I took some big swings this year. I asked for $100 million into a workforce fund that would provide more of a quarterback view for the state of what are the workforce needs. Right now, it's very pocketed.
Yeah.
So you may have a community in Guyman doing something great, but it may not be being fed by the career tech system the right way, right? You may have an employer in Altus that needs something very specific and we're not nimble or agile enough to meet their need immediately, or, tying workforce to economic development. Because what I've heard from a lot of companies that want to grow or relocate here is, am I going to be able to hire 500 engineers if I move to Tulsa? Or am I going to have to pilfer them from another company, which just raises the cost for everybody to do business, right? And so that one, to me, I still don't think we've really wrapped our arms around it. And when you talk about growing your economy and growing your state, we can't be solely reliant on using tax incentives to just recruit, which is what I think the default thing is. And I've said this a million times. If we can pay $1 billion to a company to relocate here, Texas can pay $2 billion. Or Denver, right? Or Kansas City, or Tallahassee. So that can't be the way we do economic development. What I think we should focus on, or what are the things our economy has some natural inherent advantages, and then let's produce those people where those companies have to move here. So if you're an aerospace engineering company, gosh, I got to go to Oklahoma City because that's where the talent is. Or if you're a agribusiness, I've got to go recruit from Stillwater and OSU because they're producing the workforce I need. And we need to think about it that way. And I don't think we're there yet. So that, for me, that's my biggest regret of what I wasn't able, personally get accomplished this session. And I'll come back at it next year. And I've learned some lessons and hopefully built some more, collaborative opportunities for my colleagues across the House to convince them why this is important for the state.
Excellent.
Well, that was my question. I was going to ask.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so if that was your biggest regret, what was your favorite piece of legislation that you passed?
For sure, as I mentioned earlier, the literacy bill. I mean, I didn't think this would be what I would really tackle when I got into the legislature, but I've just spent so much time in schools and especially elementary classrooms that I've just seen the struggles of, teachers that don't have the right or enough resources when kids are showing up in third grade and they're reading on a first grade level, and how intense that intervention needs to be for the teacher to get the kid. And if you look at the school to prison pipeline that is across the country, and you look at literacy rates and how directly proportional that is to putting kids inside of a prison system, we have got to fix that. And we're one of the worst states for literacy rates. And sometimes people get offended by that. That's not an attack on a teacher, or just saying we've got to figure it out. Let's do it. Everyone come to the table. Everyone, bring me your ideas. I'm not here to bonk anybody over the head. I'm just here to say, what do you need from me as a legislator or the chair of education to help us be better?
Right.
The other interesting one I'll bring up, and I should have mentioned it earlier, is cell phones in schools.
That one. So did that pass?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so you are.
But I am. This is the next hill for me to storm, and whether I'm storming it by myself or bringing 149 legislators
You got
with me.
national news. You made national news on that one.
And every state is trying to figure this out. If you look now, this is the next, I think, battleground issue. There was an op-ed in the Oklahoman 2 weeks ago, and it said, cell phones are weapons of mass destruction for teenagers. And I showed it to everybody I could at the Capitol and said, see, we could have been leading the country in this issue. So we're going to do a week-long study over the interim where I want to bring in national speakers talking about suicide rates, anxiety issues, teen mental health, bullying, academic outcomes, how they increase when you take away the cell phone and the distractions. And I really want to put national attention on this issue. I'm living it. I've got a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. So I'm living through raising kids in the digital age, right? Which is not something you and I definitely, you at least probably, I did not learn how to use a computer until I got to college.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? And so it's just as a parent, navigating that challenge. But again, being in schools and seeing the struggle that teachers are having to keep their students focused and not be distracted, seeing the challenges of all the social media stuff and like I have a 12-year-old that's now comparing herself to what she sees and she doesn't have a phone or a social media account, but obviously it's accessible. Right. And I hate it, frankly. So I want to tackle this issue. It's wildly polarizing.
Mm-hmm. It is, which is interesting.
Yeah. I've had parents say, well, it's a safety concern. I have to be able to call my kid anytime I want. I've had teachers tell me my school district isn't strong enough to ban them, but if you do it for us, we are all in supporting you. So it's going to be interesting, but this is going to be one I'm going to keep talking about.
I am skeptical about that argument that I have to be able to call my kid any time of the day. I went to school and my parents had no way of getting a hold of me unless they showed up.
I'm going to throw out a word for you. I was a latchkey kid, right? Yes. Nobody knows even what that term is anymore. I don't know if she knows what it is. But I was a latchkey kid, right? Yeah, like walking home from school, hid the key under the doormat. My mom wasn't home because she was working 2 jobs. And hey, here's how to make macaroni and cheese at home or a ham sandwich and do your homework and be in bed by 7:30. Now it's, Mom, I forgot my water bottle. Or, hey, I didn't bring my homework. Well, too bad. You're going to get a 0 today then. I'm not bringing it up to the school for you. Right. So, I think I understand. And even in the bill that I ran, which didn't pass, we had exceptions and exemptions that school boards could implement to if a kid had a medical issue or, maybe a kid was being raised in a split home or being raised by the grandparents. I'm sensitive to all that stuff, but you're right. No one's going to convince me that the average 10-year-old needs to be able to call their parent in the middle of the day because, their sneakers don't match their shirt. I ain't got time for that.
And I think there is really good evidence of mental health harms that have happened given access to social media at young ages where they're just not quite prepared emotionally or psychologically for what they're engaging in.
Try to hold that study before November. I want you to be on the panel. I want you to be on a panel at our conference about it.
I'm going to. I remind people, remember Arab Spring?
Yeah,
right?
I wrote a dissertation.
Arab Spring was started on Facebook.
It was.
Right? It was so you think about the power of social media or the power of a simple cell
I didn't think
phone.
I could love this man anymore, and he's speaking
right. You started a whole democratic revolution with a cell phone and your social media network, and that's how powerful that thing is. And we're giving it to a 10-year-old with no training, no guardrails, no guidelines. Here you go. Here's access to the world. Oh, the world's a big, scary place with a lot of bad things happening, and good luck. I'm just, no one's going to convince me otherwise. Sadie, I love you. You're not getting a cell phone yet.
I love it. Shout out to Sadie. We love you, honey.
All of my kids did not get cell phones until they were well into their teens, right? And some of that was because we had so many. If we did, we would have had so many that would have broke us just on the cell phone bill alone. But I think they were better off for it too, and they didn't have to deal with a lot of the issues that I see other teenagers having to deal with now. Yeah.
I went to REI last weekend. I don't know if I'm supposed to say a company name on your podcast. I'm sorry. I bought a bike. I haven't owned a bike in like over 25
like
years.
Like a pedal bike?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
I bought it because I said, we're going back to the all-American childhood. Yes. So every day we get on a bike and we go right around the neighborhood. And I'm like, I want my kids outside doing, recapturing their, childhood and youth and digging in the dirt and skinning their knee and knocking on the neighbor's doors saying, can Lily come out and play today? Like, that's what I want, because the default is, and I'll point the finger at myself, for my kids, they're bored. Dad, can I be on the iPad or whatever it is? And it's very frustrating for my wife and I. And so I said, I'm going to do something about it.
Excellent. So, yeah, well, enjoy that now. Wait till they're old enough that you're helping them buy their first car. And that's not nearly as...
Not ready.
But thank you so much for spending the time with us and sharing your thoughts. One last question, if you don't mind.
Go.
What are you going to be doing over the next few months? What's going to be taken? Obviously, you're going to be spending some time with your kids, as you mentioned, but any priorities that you're going to kind of be writing on or focusing on over the next few months?
Well, I run a small business, so I have an aerospace and defense company that I'm sure my business partner is very excited for me to re-engage on a full-time basis. We have an office downtown, and we've been growing quite significantly. We've only been in existence 3 years. I met him in business school, and he relocated to Oklahoma City from Washington, D.C. for us to start this business. So I'm excited for that. I'm going to decompress a little bit, and then I'm going to focus on the interim study. I really do want to bring more attention to this issue of the cell phones in schools. Some of the legislation that we passed this year, it's going to require us doing some rulemaking, like the literacy, how to implement it correctly. And then again, the Senate's undergoing a leadership change. After November, we'll have a new pro tem, and there'll be a new structure. And so, just thinking through, what is the next iteration of the state Senate for the 60th legislature? What does that look like? And what are the lessons we can learn from this year? And then I've got a lot of friends that are back up in their election cycle, and I know I'm a good door knocker, and that's
you heard it here first.
Yeah, that's I guess a bad thing to be known for, because a lot of people call you and say, "Hey, come to my district and help me knock doors." So. But it's cool because it gives me an opportunity to travel to some small towns, which I wouldn't be to otherwise. And meet my colleagues, meet their neighbors, and get to know their communities, and it gives you a better appreciation of, hey, why does Senator so and so why do they care about this issue, and it doesn't mean anything in Edmond.
You
know why.
You ever take your kids when you're doing that?
Yes,
I did too.
Yes. We make it some. We always look for what is the hole in the wall place to eat, right?
Yes.
That is really what drives most excursions in the Pugh family is, where are we going to eat?
Yes. That's fabulous.
Well, thank you again.
Yes.
This has been a great time reviewing the session.
This is now the second podcast.
I
That's
know.
right. This is our second time appearing.
Our first repeat legislator.
This will be awesome.
I'm honored. Thank you.
There you go. And we will be looking forward to seeing that. We definitely want to stay plugged in on your cell phone usage issue. I've been very much following that as well. So more power to you on that.
Thank you.
And thank everyone for listening. And remember,
democracy is not a spectator sport.
We'll see you next time.
Hey everyone, this is Deborah, the resident Gen Z member of the Not My Generation podcast family. Not My Generation is produced in the Possibilities Inc. studio. This episode was produced by Lauren Peaches Keller. It was edited by Santiago Ramones. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. Send a voice memo to notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu, and you could hear your voice on an upcoming episode. If you liked today's episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and sharing the podcast with others. You can check out previous episodes on any podcast app and on our podcast website at notmygeneration.captivate.fm, where we also provide our show notes. And remember, you can follow Not My Generation on X, formerly known as Twitter, at NMG Podcast, and on Facebook at Not My Generation Podcast. We look forward to interacting with you soon.